The sun above New Lagos Station shimmered like molten gold, its rays diffused through the dome's transparent panels that stretched across the orbital city. Below it, continents of the green-blue planet Odara reflected the future of humanity, a place where science met ancestry and tradition walked hand in hand with the hum of machines. The air smelled faintly of ozone and palm resin, a fusion of old Earth memories and tomorrow's inventions. Dr. Zuri Okafor stood before the window, her reflection caught between galaxies, her mind already light years ahead. She had grown up listening to her grandmother's stories about the first African spacefarers, the ones who refused to let history be rewritten without their names in it. Now, generations later, Zuri carried that legacy inside her white lab coat. Her braids were tied with copper threads that conducted neural energy, glinting like living circuits. Every detail about her spoke of balance, between technology and tradition, ambition and humility. The New Lagos Research Colony was a marvel of the Afro-futurist age. Every wall bore symbols of heritage encoded into the design, fractal patterns inspired by Adinkra, glowing faintly in hues of emerald and gold. Choirs of automated drones buzzed softly as they cleaned solar filters. Outside, the planetary rings gleamed like woven bracelets around a divine wrist. Humanity had come far. But Zuri knew. Progress without purpose meant nothing. "Doctor, Okafor," called a voice from behind. It was Jaden Mbatha, her colleague and oldest friend, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark skin illuminated by the cool glow of the lab's holograms. "You've been staring at that sky for 10 minutes. What are you searching for this time, inspiration or trouble?" Zuri smiled. "Both, maybe." "Science never comes without a little chaos." "Then you're in luck," he said, gesturing toward the central console. "Command just approved our deep field survey. We'll be the first human team to enter the X-Ruth Belt, uncharted territory." Her heartbeat quickened. The X-Ruth Belt, a region dense with unidentifiable biological signals, a rumor whispered through research stations for years. Many believed it housed the remnants of an extinct civilization. Others thought it was cursed space. Zuri only saw it as possibility. She turned to Jaden. "Then we'd better make history worth telling." As she prepared the ship manifest, the hum of the lab felt like a pulse. Steady, alive, ancestral. Her grandmother once said that every breath a person took was borrowed from someone before them. Zuri liked that thought. It reminded her that even in space, she carried the rhythm of the drums that once echoed under African skies. Outside, the orbital markets of New Lagos buzzed with life, traders shouting prices for starfruit, children chasing each other through zero-gravity corridors, the melodic mix of Yoruba, Swahili, and English floating through the air. Humanity had built a culture of resilience across the stars. Each world carried a new dialect of freedom. Still, Zuri felt a weight, the silent pressure of representation. Even in a galaxy of 1,000 worlds, black scientists like her were still seen as rare anomalies. Every discovery she made carried not just her name, but the hopes of a lineage that had fought to be seen. And she intended to honor that. Her gaze drifted back to the planet below. Odara rotated slowly, its oceans gleaming like polished obsidian. Somewhere down there, new forms of life waited. Somewhere out there, something would test everything she believed about humanity. She took a slow breath, exhaled with calm resolve, and whispered, "We go where knowledge calls." The console blinked, mission confirmed. The X-Ruth Belt awaited. Before she left, Zuri opened her research log and recorded the first entry. "Exploration begins tomorrow. May our curiosity be stronger than our fear." Then she paused, turned toward the invisible audience that might one day listen to her story, and added with quiet conviction, "If you believe in the power of discovery, if you believe every voice deserves a place among the stars, join us. Subscribe to our journey. Let's breathe new life into the universe together." The lights dimmed as the ship's engines began to hum in distant hangars, a promise of what was to come. Morning light scattered through the lab's glass ceiling, painting soft amber reflections across the work tables. The rhythm of the city beneath the orbital station was waking, engines humming, merchants chanting, data streams flowing like rivers of code. Yet, inside the lab, Dr. Zuri Okafor stood in silence. Her hands hovered above a crystalline biocapsule that contained samples from a distant moon. They pulsed faintly like breathing organisms. She admired their persistence. Even in the void, life fought to adapt. Jaden entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of steaming cola root tea. "You're up early again. You don't sleep much before a mission, do you?" Zuri smiled faintly. "Sleep feels like surrender. There's too much to prepare, too much to think about." He placed a cup beside her. "You always say that. But the truth is, you're afraid of what happens if you stop moving." Her eyes lingered on the biocapsule. "Maybe I am. My mother used to say our minds are like stars, always burning, never resting. If they go dark, everything we've built disappears." Jaden studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Just don't let that fire consume you." Zuri didn't answer. The pressure she felt wasn't something words could fix. She had spent her entire career walking a narrow bridge between respect and scrutiny. Every conference, every publication, she had to prove twice as much, twice as often. Her colleagues admired her discoveries, but often spoke of her as if she were an exception, not a symbol of what was possible. She turned toward the holographic display hovering above her desk. The ship's schematic spun slowly, labeled Moyo 2, a Yoruba word meaning life. It was her design, a vessel built for research, not war. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had built thousands of ships for conquest, but only a handful for understanding. The intercom chimed. "Dr. Okafor Mission Council request your presence at 0800. Zuri inhaled sharply. The council. That meant scrutiny. That meant politics. She gathered her notes and straightened her posture. "Time to justify our curiosity again," she murmured. Jaden caught up to her as they walked through the corridor lined with murals, depictions of black scientists, explorers, and philosophers who had changed the course of human space exploration. Names like Abeni Cole, Kwame Hughes, and Onyekachi Diallo glowed faintly beneath each portrait. Their stories whispered reminders of endurance. "Do you ever think," Jaden asked quietly, "that all of this, space, discovery, progress, might not be worth the cost?" Zuri paused. "You mean the loneliness?" He nodded. She sighed. "Every explorer is lonely. But loneliness is the price of seeing beyond what others can imagine. Our ancestors crossed oceans with nothing but stars as guides. We cross galaxies. The feeling's the same." When they entered the council chamber, the air grew colder. Around a circular table sat 12 figures, each representing different research divisions. Dr. Hassan, the chairwoman, greeted them curtly. "Dr. Okafor, we've reviewed your proposal to enter the Extruth Belt. Your data is compelling, but your request for unrestricted access raises concerns." Zuri kept her tone calm. "If we want real answers, we can't study the unknown from a distance. Risk is part of discovery." Another member leaned forward. "And what if your risk provokes hostility from the species rumored to inhabit that region?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Fear has never preserved humanity. Understanding has." Silence filled the room. Finally, Hassan nodded. "Very well. Permission granted. Proceed at your own discretion." Outside the chamber, Jaden exhaled. "You just argued down an entire council." "Not for me," Zuri said softly. "For everyone who was told curiosity has limits." As they walked back, she felt the old ache of doubt fade into determination. Tomorrow she would lead her team into the Extruth Belt. She didn't know what awaited them, but for the first time in years, the fear in her chest felt like possibility. At her workstation, she opened her log and whispered to herself, "If I fail forward. That's the only way progress breathes." The lights dimmed around her, the hum of machinery deepening like a heartbeat. And somewhere beyond the stars, something unseen listened. The Moyo 2 cut through the dark like a blade of light. The ship's exterior shimmered with shifting hues of bronze and sapphire, reflecting the radiation from nearby pulsars. Inside, The crew moved with quiet precision. Dr. Zuri Okafor stood at the command console, her gaze fixed on the vast starfield ahead. The X-Ruth belt sprawled before them, a region of tangled nebulae and debris, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent clouds. It looked alive. "Radiation levels stable," said Jaden from the navigation seat, "but electromagnetic activity's off the charts. Whatever's out there isn't just static." Zuri leaned forward. "Increase spectral resolution. I want to see what's hiding behind that interference." The screen flickered, and suddenly a faint pattern appeared, rhythmic bursts of light repeating at precise intervals, too structured to be natural. "Could it be a signal?" asked Amara, the communications officer, her braided hair tied back with a band of copper thread like Zuri's. Zuri's eyes narrowed. "If it is, it's not in any known frequency band." The pattern changed. The lights pulsed faster, then slower, as though reacting to their scans. "Send a standard greeting beacon," Zuri ordered. "Let's see if it answers." Amara tapped the console, releasing a pulse of encoded light toward the nebula. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the ship shuddered, a deep vibration that resonated through the hull. Jaden's voice sharpened. "Gravitational fluctuation. Something's pulling us in." Zuri gripped the edge of the console. "Reverse thrust. Steady the core alignment." The Moyo 2 fought the invisible tide, engines roaring. Through the viewport, the glowing mist parted, revealing a colossal structure drifting among the dust. A biomechanical vessel, its surface covered in translucent scales that shimmered like wet obsidian. "Life readings," Zuri demanded. Amara's eyes widened. "Multiple. They're fluctuating. Like the ship itself is breathing." Before they could react, a section of the alien ship opened, releasing a burst of light that enveloped the Moyo 2. Jaden cursed. "We're caught in a tractor beam." The human ship trembled until the pull stopped. Silence. Only the soft hum of the systems remained. Then, through the comm channel, a sound emerged, a low, rasping rhythm that almost resembled words. "Amara," Zuri said quietly, "try translating." I can't. It's not structured language, it's—" She hesitated. "It's respiration. Someone's suffocating." The realization hit like a pulse. Zuri turned toward the cargo bay monitors. One of the smaller escape pods, jettisoned earlier for sample collection, had been retrieved automatically by the alien vessel. Inside it, faint traces of oxygen remained, and something alive. Without thinking, Zuri grabbed an emergency respirator and sprinted down the corridor. Jaden followed, his voice echoing behind her. "Zuri, wait! We don't even know if it's safe." "I can't just let something die," she shouted back. The bay door hissed open. Inside, the pod was cracked, hissing faintly as vapor escaped. Curled within it was a being, tall, lean, with dark crystalline skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Its chest heaved irregularly, its inner membranes tightening as though trying to draw non-existent air. Zuri knelt beside it, heart pounding. "Oxygen mix at 16%, too low." She tore the mask from her neck and placed it over the creature's mouth slit. The respirator's gauge blinked red, pressure dropping fast. Jaden appeared behind her. "Zuri, you're giving it your supply. You'll black out." Her breath came in shallow bursts. "Then make sure it's worth it." The alien's chest expanded. Once, twice. Then it exhaled, releasing a faint blue mist that drifted toward her. The sound that followed wasn't words, but a tone, soft, melodic, almost like gratitude. Zuri fell back, gasping as Jaden helped her up. The alien's eyes, if they were eyes, glowed briefly, then dimmed as it slipped into unconsciousness. Jaden stared at her, awe and fear mixed in his expression. "You just shared oxygen with an alien." Zuri looked at the being, her vision still spinning. "No," she whispered. "I shared life." The hum of the ship deepened, almost as if the alien vessel outside had heard her. In the quiet that followed, something ancient and powerful shifted in the void, a presence now aware of her. And far beyond the nebula, Unseen eyes began to turn toward Moyo 2. The silence after the rescue felt heavier than vacuum. The Moyo 2 drifted in orbit beside the vast alien ship, its lights dimmed to conserve power. Inside the medbay, Dr. Zuri Okafor sat by the containment field, watching the creature she had saved. The alien, later identified through bioscan as Xruthian, rested motionless, its chest rising and falling with slow, deliberate rhythm. The faint glow beneath its crystalline skin flickered like distant lightning. Jaden entered quietly. "Vitals are stable," he said, scanning the readings. "Whatever it breathes, it's close enough to oxygen to keep it alive." Zuri nodded, exhaustion weighing down her limbs. "Then we did the right thing." He crossed his arms. "Maybe. But you also might have just linked us to an entire civilization we don't understand." "I'd rather be guilty of compassion than ignorance," she replied, her voice soft but firm. The ship's intercom crackled. "Dr. Okafor, unidentified vessels approaching. They're massive." Zuri stood, heart pounding. Visual feed now. The main screen flared to life, revealing 3 colossal ships emerging from the nebula. Each was shaped like a living organism, skeletal wings, organic plating, glowing cores pulsing in unison. The alien ship beside them responded instantly, emitting a series of color shifts along its hull, a language of light. Amara's voice trembled. "Zuri, they're communicating." "And they're scanning us." Zuri's throat tightened. "Keep shields down, no aggression." The largest vessel sent a focused beam toward the Moyo 2. The translation AI struggled, then produced a distorted voice. "Human, the breath you shared was sacred. You have bound yourself to the Xruth. Prepare for escort." The crew exchanged stunned glances. Jaden whispered, "Bound." "What does that even mean?" Zuri swallowed. "It means we're going to their world." Minutes later, the alien ship surrounded them, guiding the Moyo 2 through a corridor of glowing mist. The nebula's density shifted until stars vanished completely, replaced by radiant clouds that moved like living tissue. When they emerged, the view stole every breath from the crew. Below stretched the Xruth homeworld, a planet half submerged in shimmering oceans of liquid glass, its continents veined with light. Massive spires rose from the surface, each shaped like a rib of some ancient creature. Lightning flickered along their edges, feeding into orbiting stations that looked grown, not built. "Magnificent," whispered Amara. Zuri felt an ache deep in her chest. They're alive with their planet. As they descended into orbit, a transmission came through. The translated voice was clearer now, resonant, almost ceremonial. "Dr. Zuri Okafor of humanity, you preserved the breath of our kin. In return, the Xruth shall preserve yours. You are requested at the seat of exchange." Jaden frowned. "Requested or commanded?" Zuri smiled faintly. "In diplomacy, those are the same thing." When they landed on the orbital platform, a delegation awaited them, tall Xruthians wearing bioluminescent filaments that pulsed in complex patterns. Their movements were slow, graceful, and eerily synchronized. The leader stepped forward, bowing slightly, its voice a mix of vibration and tone. "You have done what few among your kind would. You gave breath without expectation. Among our people, that act binds souls." Zuri hesitated. "I didn't know your customs. I only did what was right." "That is why it is sacred," the being replied. "Our law demands reciprocity. Until your final breath, the Xruth are bound to serve you." Jaden blinked in disbelief. "Serve? That's not what we—" Zuri raised a hand gently. "Let me speak." She looked at the alien. "Then I accept your service not as submission but as friendship. My people believe the same, that breath connects all life." The leader inclined its head. "Then friendship shall be our vow." A low resonance filled the air, vibrating through their bones, a communal hum like the heartbeat of a world. The Xruth delegation turned, motioning for her to follow toward a massive chamber pulsing with amber light. Zuri glanced back at Jaden, his expression mixed pride and worry. "You just made first contact, Zuri, and you might have rewritten history." She exhaled slowly, History needed rewriting. As the chamber doors opened and the alien light poured over her, a strange certainty settled in her chest. What she had started as an act of compassion would change not just her life, but the balance of two civilizations. And somewhere deep within her, beneath awe and fear, a quiet voice whispered, "This is only the beginning." The return to Odara was nothing like their departure. News of Zuri's act had traveled faster than light. The entire system buzzed with speculation. A human scientist shared breath with an alien, an alliance forged through compassion, a new age of diplomacy. Yet beneath the celebration pulsed unease. Humanity had never stood this close to something it couldn't control. The Moyo 2 entered orbit under escort. Government channels flooded with encrypted transmissions. Reporters begged for interviews. Political factions demanded answers. Zuri ignored them all. She had promised transparency, but not surrender. The Exruth had followed her home, and their ships, silent, organic, immense, hovered like living monuments above the planet's atmosphere. When the delegation finally descended, Odara's skies shimmered in hues of gold and deep violet. Thousands gathered across the capital's terraces to witness history. The Exruth didn't use traditional transport. They glided, wrapped in columns of luminous energy that carried them to the surface. Jaden walked beside Zuri, tension in his shoulders. "You realize half the council thinks this is a military occupation?" Zuri's expression remained steady. "Then the other half should remind them what cooperation looks like," he sighed. "You always did love impossible odds. I just hate wasted chances." The landing terrace stretched before them, lined with diplomats, soldiers, and scholars from across the human colonies. Among them stood Minister Adisa Endower, a shrewd woman known for her ability to read people like equations. Her voice was smooth but firm as Zuri approached. "Dr. Okafor, you've brought guests few expected or desired." "They came in peace," Zuri replied, "and to honor a promise." Adisa's gaze shifted to the Exruth delegation as they approached. Their leader, the same who had spoken to Zuri on their world, emitted a low harmonic tone that vibrated through the air. The translation AI rendered it softly. "We come bearing the breath pact. Our kin's life was preserved by yours. As decreed, we serve." Murmurs erupted among the human delegates. Serve. The word unsettled them. Service implied hierarchy, obligation, power. Zuri felt the tension thicken like static. She stepped forward. "The Exruth do not serve as slaves or subordinates. Their vow is symbolic, an exchange of honor, not ownership." Adisa's expression remained unreadable. "Symbolism has started wars, Dr. Okafor." The Exruth leader turned toward her, head tilting. "Among our kind, debt is sacred. To serve is to preserve harmony." Zuri interjected gently, "Then let this service be mutual." For a long moment, the two species faced each other in silence, a tableau of history's weight balanced on a single breath. Then, unexpectedly, the Exruth leader placed its hand, and cool, crystalline, against Zuri's chest, just above her heart. The gesture was solemn, almost reverent. The crowd gasped. Jaden whispered, "What does that mean?" Zuri's voice barely rose above the hum of the air. "Recognition. Among the Exruth, it means trust beyond words." That single act shifted the mood. The tension didn't vanish, but it softened. Adisa's lips curved faintly, the closest she came to approval. Then perhaps diplomacy begins with touch rather than treaties. Later, inside the Grand Assembly Hall, Zuri faced the council once again. The chamber glowed with warm amber light, filtered through layers of carved glass, each pane etched with symbols of human unity. But now, alien figures stood among them, towering, elegant, unfamiliar. Adisa began, "Doctor Okafor, humanity honors your courage, but your actions carry implications that reach beyond you. Do you believe the Exruth can coexist with us peacefully?" Zuri met her gaze. "They already have. Fear won't guide us forward." "Understanding will," Jaden added quietly from his seat. "And maybe compassion's the strongest science we've got." The chamber filled with murmurs again, but this time curiosity outweighed suspicion. For the first time, Zuri saw possibility in their eyes, not fear. As the meeting adjourned, she stepped outside into the open air. The ex-Ruth ships gleamed above the skyline, suspended like constellations. Wind brushed against her face, carrying faint echoes of drums and laughter from the city below. Jaden joined her, smiling slightly. "You just turned a political storm into a sunrise." Zuri exhaled. "The storm's not over. But at least now we're breathing the same air." Above them, the ex-Ruth vessels pulsed once, a synchronized flash, like a heartbeat shared between worlds. And for the first time in centuries, humanity wasn't alone in the rhythm. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of Odara began to change. What had started as tension transformed into cautious fascination. The ex-Ruth delegation remained stationed within the capital's diplomatic sector, their presence both alien and oddly grounding. They walked the streets alongside humans, their luminous skin glowing softly beneath the city's twin suns, their gestures graceful yet deliberate. Where suspicion once lingered, curiosity began to bloom. Dr. Zuri Okafor spent her days balancing science and diplomacy. Her mornings were devoted to the research exchange program she had proposed, the Breath Initiative, as she named it, dedicated to studying the biological, cultural, and philosophical systems of both species. Her afternoons belonged to discussions with the ex-Ruth about ethics, language, and the meaning of life itself. One morning, while reviewing data inside the cross-species laboratory, Zuri watched as an ex-Ruthian named Thrall adjusted an oxygen diffuser. Its long fingers moved with precision, releasing faint streaks of iridescent mist. "You still do not trust our measurements," Thrall said, its voice a series of melodic vibrations that the translator rendered into words with a soft hum. Zuri smiled. "It's not about trust. It's about understanding your process. You think through rhythm, we think through sequence, but maybe rhythm is just another kind of logic." Thrall tilted its head. "Rhythm is balance. Every action breathes, every choice exhales. That is how we live." Zuri paused, thinking of her grandmother's saying, "Every breath carries the voice of those before you." For the first time, she wondered if humanity and the ex-Ruth had been searching for the same truth all along, just speaking it in different languages. Outside, Odara pulsed with the energy of a city reborn. Markets now displayed joint creations, fabrics that shimmered like ex-Ruthian scales woven with human fibers, instruments that produced harmonies blending African polyrhythms with alien frequencies. Children of both species learned side by side, their laughter dissolving centuries of separation. Jaden entered the lab carrying a tablet full of notes. "The Council approved your proposal for joint exploration teams," he said, grinning. "You're officially the bridge everyone's arguing about." She laughed softly. "Bridges don't exist to win arguments. They exist to connect what fear keeps apart." He nodded. "Still, you're doing what no one else could. Even Adisa called you the scientist who breathes between worlds." Zuri's eyes softened. "If we can breathe together, maybe we can live together." Later that evening, she joined Thrall and several other ex-Ruth for what they called a resonance meal. It wasn't eating in the human sense. Rather, it was a ritual of shared vibration, where participants aligned breathing patterns to create harmonic frequencies that stimulated sustenance. The room shimmered with sound, each tone blending into the next, forming a living symphony. Zuri closed her eyes and matched her rhythm to theirs. At first she faltered, her breath uneven, but soon she found the pulse, deep, steady, familiar. It was the rhythm of the talking drums her ancestors had once used to speak across villages, now echoing across galaxies. When the resonance ended, Thrall turned to her and said softly, "You breathe as one of us now." The word struck something deep in her chest, pride, humility, and a quiet fear. She had become a symbol of unity, but symbols bore weight. Every step forward came with scrutiny, from politicians who still distrusted the ex-Ruth, and from scientists who accused her of abandoning objectivity for empathy. That night, alone in her quarters, she opened her research journal. "Understanding begins where ego ends," she wrote. "The ex-Ruth live by resonance. We live by reason, but perhaps reason without rhythm is silence. Outside her window, the skyline shimmered with blue and gold. The X-Ruth ships above Odara pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm, almost like breathing. Zuri pressed her palm to the glass, feeling that rhythm vibrate faintly through her skin. Jaden's voice echoed in her mind. "You're building something that can't be undone." She whispered into the quiet, "Then let it stand strong enough to outlive us." The city exhaled beneath her, two civilizations learning to share the same breath, unaware of how fragile that harmony would soon become. It was late when Zuri received the encrypted transmission. The Moyo 2 had just returned from its latest survey mission, and she had barely settled into her quarters before the alert pinged across her desk. Her fingers hesitated above the tablet. There was a note of urgency in the message from the X-Ruth, a call for immediate communication. She opened the file. The message was short but chilling. "A great darkness moves through the galaxy. We have felt it stir. We are not alone." The words sent a cold shiver down her spine. Zuri immediately contacted Jaden, who arrived at her quarters within minutes. His face was lined with concern. "What's going on, Zuri?" "It's them," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The X-Ruth are talking about something bigger than us. Something coming." Jaden frowned. "Do you think it's the same threat we've been hearing about, the one the Council tried to silence?" Zuri nodded. The Council had been dismissive of rumors about a galactic force expanding outward, consuming everything in its path. Yet the X-Ruth's ancient awareness of the stars had never been wrong. She could feel the weight of their words, the reverberation of something ancient, hungry and relentless. She switched on the communication console, sending a direct link to Thrall, the X-Ruth leader. The alien appeared on the screen moments later, its form glowing in the dim light of its environment. "Doctor." "Okafor," Thrall's voice hummed. "The shadows grow larger, pressing in from the edges of our knowledge. A new enemy stirs. The Jarat Collective." Zuri's breath caught. She had heard of them in passing. Stories of a race of machine-like conquerors, a force of destruction that swept through solar systems without mercy. A name whispered in fear, but dismissed as myth. "Are they real?" Zuri asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Thrall's eyes dimmed as it spoke again. "They are as real as the stars themselves. We felt them pass through the Oort cloud 2 cycles ago, and now they move toward our worlds. They devour planets, converting all life into their own. The breath pact you forged, it might not be enough to protect you." Zuri's mind raced. The X-Ruth had given them a gift, their trust, their knowledge, their protection, but it now seemed fragile against the darkness closing in. "Can they be stopped?" Jaden asked, his voice edged with disbelief. This is war, Zuri." Zuri's gaze shifted to the large window in her quarters, where the twin moons of Odara glowed in the distance. She had spent so long trying to build peace, to bridge worlds that had been kept apart by fear and misunderstanding. Now it seemed as though that work was being tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. She turned back to the console, her tone resolute. "We don't know yet, Jaden, but we're not going to wait to find out. We'll need every ally we can get. Start contacting the Council. This threat is bigger than anything we've faced before." Thrall's image flickered slightly, then returned. "The Jarat move in silence, but we can feel their breath. And it is the same darkness that has touched the X-Ruth before. We will fight alongside you, Dr. Okafor, but you must prepare. Our worlds may fall, but we will not fall alone." Zuri closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the X-Ruth's words sinking in. The alliance she had worked so hard to build was now her greatest asset. It would need to be more than just symbolic. It would need to become a true coalition, if they were to stand a chance against the Jarat Collective. "We will be ready," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "We have no other choice." Jaden stepped closer, his hand resting on the back of her chair. "We've got one hell of a fight ahead of us." Zuri stood up, her eyes meeting his with quiet resolve. "I've been in battles before, Jaden, but this one is different. It's not just about survival. It's about ensuring that we and everything we've worked for get to stay in the light." Jaden nodded. "Then let's make sure the darkness never gets close enough to touch us." The The transmission ended, and Zuri was left alone with the reality of what lay ahead. The Jarat Collective was a threat unlike any they had faced before, but she wasn't about to let fear dictate the course of her actions. She had led humanity into the stars, and now she would lead them through the storm. But she knew one thing for certain: the Breath Pact, the bond with the Xruth, might just be the key to saving them all. The following days passed in a blur of frantic activity. The skies over Odara remained peaceful, but the tension in the air was palpable. As the Xruth ships floated just beyond the planet's atmosphere, a sense of urgency gripped every corner of the human colonies. Zuri's days were now filled with planning meetings, strategy briefings, and constant communication with the Council. Her nights were spent in her lab, running simulations, designing new tech for defense, and trying to find any advantage they could use against the Jarat Collective. Jaden, ever her steady partner, worked beside her, helping to coordinate their efforts with the Xruth. "We've been in contact with several other colonies," he said one evening, his voice steady, though his brow furrowed with concern. "Most are rallying, but some aren't convinced the threat is as real as you say. The Jarat Collective is still seen by some as just a myth." Zuri's hands clenched around her data tablet. "Myths don't leave trails of destruction. The Jarat are real. We have to make them see it before it's too late." As Zuri watched the screen flicker, showing reports of damaged outposts and shattered civilizations far from their reach, a cold certainty settled in her chest. The Jarat weren't just destroyers, they were manipulators, capable of erasing not only physical beings but entire histories, reducing everything to a mechanical void. Their hunger wasn't just for resources, it was for culture, for identity. They consumed civilizations one piece at a time. Jaden placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're ready, Zuri. We've got the Xruth's tech, the human forces behind us. We just need to make the call." His words were comforting, but his eyes showed the weight of the impending conflict. Zuri exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "We're not just preparing for a battle, Jaden. We're preparing for a war against everything that's ever made us who we are." She looked at the holographic map of the galaxy on her desk, the dark cloud of the Jarat, advancing through star systems like a slow, inevitable storm. "This is more than defense, it's survival." The next morning, Zuri stood before the assembly of human and Xruth leaders. The room was heavy with expectation, filled with representatives of the Council, military strategists, and a few remaining skeptics. She was tired, but her resolve was stronger than ever. She couldn't afford to falter now. "Everyone," she began, her voice clear and commanding. "We've been preparing for weeks, but now it's time to act. The Jarat Collective will be upon us soon. We've learned from their past invasions. They won't waste time. They'll hit our most vulnerable points first, and communication hubs, power grids, colonies. They'll erase everything we are." She paused, letting her words settle in the room. The silence was thick, but it was different now. There were no more whispers of disbelief, only the somber realization of what was coming. Zuri continued, "The Breath Pact we formed with the Xruth isn't just about shared knowledge, it's about survival. We stand together, not as separate species, but as one force. We'll need everything, every soldier, every scientist, every ally. If we're going to win, we'll need to fight smarter than the Jarat. We'll need to exploit their weaknesses." The holograms around the room flickered to life, displaying military schematics and defensive strategies. Zuri's voice gained strength as she outlined the plans, using Xruthian energy signatures to confuse the Jarat's sensors, deploying advanced cloaking technology developed from the Xruth's organic ships, and launching a counterattack from multiple fronts to disorient the enemy. "Every decision we make," she said, looking each leader in the eye, "must be a step toward unity. Our greatest weapon is not our technology, it's our ability to act as one regardless of the barriers between us." Jaden stepped forward, his presence grounding the room. "The Jarat see us as nothing more than prey, but they've never faced something like this before. We're ready. And together, we will fight until the last breath." The room erupted in a murmured chorus of agreement, some nodding, others whispering to their colleagues. Zuri felt the weight of their trust and the pressure to ensure they weren't misled. But as she met Jaden's eyes, she knew they had no other choice. The meeting adjourned with a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. Leaders moved swiftly to carry out their orders, while soldiers prepared for deployment. Zuri remained behind, watching as the last of the strategists filed out. Outside her office, she could hear the sounds of preparation, the clang of metal, the hum of engines coming to life. The peaceful skyline of Odara was now dotted with ships, some human, others ex-Ruth, all preparing for the battle ahead. Jaden reappeared at her side, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "You've done what no one else could, Zuri. You've brought us all together." She looked out the window, watching as the first of the fleet ships launched into space. "We're just getting started, Jaden. The real battle hasn't even begun." The first wave of the Jarat collective arrived without warning. At first it seemed like just another pulse in the void, a slight tremor in the galactic fabric that was dismissed as a mere cosmic anomaly. But as the fleet of the Jarat drew closer to Odara's outer rim, their presence became undeniable. Ships the size of moons, floating like death incarnate, their massive mechanical exoskeletons creaking as if alive, cutting through space with terrifying precision. Zuri stood at the command center, her fingers tapping rapidly across the holographic interface, working through data streams and battle maps. The tension in the room was thick, like smoke curling through the air, choking out any sense of hope. The human fleet, now joined by the ex-Ruth, had gathered at the outer orbit of Odara's system, but they were outmatched. The Jarat didn't just rely on sheer force. Their technology bent reality itself, disrupting space-time with their energy weapons and cloaking systems that rendered their fleet nearly invisible until the final moments. "Status update," Zuri demanded, her voice steely despite the mounting pressure. She had spent weeks preparing for this, but nothing could have fully prepared her for the feeling of watching an enemy that seemed unstoppable approach her home. Jaden, standing at her side, adjusted the display in front of them. "We've engaged at the edge of the asteroid belt. Ex-Ruth's organic shielding is holding up, but it's not enough. We need to hit their command ship before they deploy the ground forces." Zuri nodded, analyzing the rapidly evolving battlefield. It was too late for small tactics. They needed a decisive strike. "Redirect all available power to the pulse cannon. We'll create an opening in their defenses. Once we're through, we hit them with everything we've got." The crew, already tense and waiting for orders, followed her every command. Zuri didn't flinch. She knew that no matter how careful they had been in preparation, a fight of this magnitude would leave them scarred. The war had begun. The skies above Odara turned dark, rippling as the first of the Jarat's ships released a wave of energy that shuddered through the atmosphere. Cities below dimmed their lights in response, while the planetary defense systems readied themselves. The hum of defensive shields activated around key sites, but Zuri knew it wouldn't be enough. The Jarat collective was not like any enemy they had faced before. "Here they come," Jaden said, his voice laced with urgency. "We've only got one shot at this." "Then we make it count," Zuri said, clenching her fist. Her heart hammered in her chest, but her resolve remained as sharp as ever. The Jarat may have been a force unlike any they'd ever seen, but they hadn't reckoned with the combined might of humanity and the ex-Ruth. The battle began with a deafening explosion. The pulse cannon, designed with ex-Ruth tech, fired off a bright beam of concentrated energy that tore through the Jarat defenses. For a brief, miraculous moment, it looked like they might have a chance. But as the beam passed through, the Jarat ships adapted instantly, redirecting their energy shields. The blow did not cripple them. Instead, it angered them. Zuri's eyes locked onto the command ship, now visible in its full, horrifying grandeur. Its skeletal frame stretched across the starfield like a leviathan made of metal and terror. It was the center of their control, a hive of dark mechanical intelligence. "Adjust trajectory," Zuri shouted, pulling up the manual controls. "If we can disable that ship, we disable their coordination, take out their leader, and we take out their strategy." Jaden keyed in the coordinates as Zuri focused, her hands steady on the controls. A series of subroutines kicked in, calculating the optimal strike point. "Ready to fire, Captain." "Do it," Zuri ordered. The command ship was now within range, its silhouette growing larger, more menacing. She didn't flinch. She couldn't. Not now. The cannon fired again, but this time it was not a single beam. It was a focused burst, a concentrated blast designed to pierce their outer layers. For a moment, time seemed to slow as the beam streaked toward the Jarrat ship, splitting the void between them. The explosion that followed was nothing short of magnificent. The command ship's energy shields crackled under the assault, flaring like the last breath of a dying star. For a moment it looked like they might have succeeded, but then the Jarrat responded in kind, unleashing a barrage of weapons that shook the entire fleet. Zuri's heart dropped as the pulse cannon's power began to falter. Their opening had closed. "Shields down to 20%, we're taking heavy fire," one of the crew members shouted. But Zuri, undeterred, stood firm. "We'll hold. The Exruth will keep them occupied. Prepare the second strike. We've got one more shot." As the battle raged on, the fate of Odara and every world in its system hung in the balance. Zuri knew the Jarrat would not relent, but she would not bow either. Not while there was breath left in her lungs. Not while the fire of her people still burned. The battle stretched into what felt like an eternity. The darkness of space was fractured by flashes of blinding light as the Jarrat fleet clashed against the unified forces of humanity and the Exruth. Every minute felt like a countdown to something inevitable, but Zuri could still feel the spark of resistance. She refused to let it fade. The Moyo 2 was holding its own, but just barely. The pulse cannon, now severely weakened from the initial salvo, was little more than a backup weapon. The Jarrat, relentless in their assault, seemed to adapt faster than they could attack. Every move they made was calculated, every retreat a setup for a more devastating strike. Yet the alliance between humanity and the Exruth held strong. "We're losing ground." Jaden's voice was tight with urgency as he watched the screens. "The Jarrat are preparing for a full planetary bombardment. They've reconfigured their weapons. We'll be sitting ducks if we don't do something." Zuri stood at the front, unmoving, her gaze locked on the battle unfolding on the holographic display. The Jarrat's next move was clear. They intended to crush their opponents with overwhelming firepower, a final strike that could annihilate everything. "Not if we stop them first," she muttered under her breath. She turned to Jaden, her eyes fierce with resolve. "We've got one last chance. I need all our forces to push forward. We can't wait for their final strike. We have to strike now before they can line up their fire." Jaden's expression was a mix of disbelief and determination. "Are you sure? We're talking about hitting them with everything we've got. We don't even know if we can't." Zuri cut him off. "We have to. We don't have a choice. If we let them regroup, it's over. The Exruth are ready. Now we need to finish what we started." She punched a few commands into the console, her heart hammering in her chest. The room buzzed with activity, officers and soldiers working in perfect synchronicity as they followed her instructions. The battle shifted in real time. Ships that had been retreating now surged forward, moving toward the heart of the Jarrat fleet. The human and Exruth forces, coordinated by Zuri's tactical guidance, formed a perimeter around the largest of the Jarrat ships, their collective power surging like a wave ready to crash. As Zuri's orders rang out, Jaden called out from the side. "Here they come, the Jarrat are retaliating, their fleet splitting, flanking us." Zuri's mind raced. She'd anticipated the Jarrat's adaptability, but not at this scale. They were like shadows, always moving, always shifting. She could feel the weight of her decisions bearing down on her. This moment would define everything. Focus fire on their command ship. We need to break their leadership structure. Without it, they'll crumble. The Moyo 2 and its allies moved as one, a swarm of precision and force. The Jarrat's ships, massive and imposing, turned to meet them, but their heavy weapons were slower now, their shields flickering. The pressure was mounting on both sides, and Zuri knew it was now or never. Suddenly an explosion rocked the front of the fleet. A Exruth ship hit in a critical area, disintegrated in a burst of light. Zuri's stomach dropped as the massive hull turned into fragments, drifting like broken shards in space. "No!" Jaden shouted, but Zuri was already moving, her voice commanding, "Push forward! We can't let their sacrifice be in vain." The Moyo 2 rocketed ahead, directly toward the heart of the Jarat fleet. Zuri's pulse quickened, the adrenaline flooding her system. With each passing second, their chances grew slimmer, but there was no turning back. The final strike was upon them. Zuri didn't hesitate. "Now!" she screamed, and the fleet's combined firepower focused on the Jarat command ship. The energy from their weapons converged on the target, a concentrated blast that slammed into the Jarat ship's weakened core. The result was catastrophic. For a moment there was silence. Then the ship exploded, an eruption of fire and debris that painted the galaxy in a blaze of color. Zuri watched in stunned silence as the debris of the Jarat's flagship scattered through space. It was over. Their command ship had fallen. But the war wasn't finished yet. Zuri felt a ripple of fear pass through the fleet as the Jarat regrouped, their remaining ships now disorganized but still deadly. Yet with their command ship gone, their coordination faltered. It was like cutting the head off a serpent. The body still wriggled, but it was no longer a threat. "Keep pressing them!" Zuri shouted. "Their fleet is vulnerable! Finish what we started!" The remaining Jarat ships began to break apart, their formations splintering under the coordinated fire from the human and ex-Ruth forces. One by one, the Jarat ships fell, their massive bodies crumpling under the weight of the combined assault. The final blow came from an ex-Ruth fighter that surged through the chaos, striking the last of the Jarat's defensive lines. The remaining ships scattered, fleeing into the dark depths of space. Zuri let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was the beginning of one. The silence after the battle was almost as deafening as the war itself. The space around Odara, once filled with the thunderous roar of laser fire and explosions, was now eerily quiet. What remained of the Jarat Collective's fleet floated in shattered fragments, their remains scattered like broken dreams across the cold vastness of the galaxy. Zuri sat in the command center of the Moyo II, her fingers resting lightly on the console. The battle had been won, but the victory tasted bitter. The cost had been too high, too many lives lost, too many sacrifices made. The ex-Ruth, though resilient, had suffered losses. Human forces had fought valiantly, but the scars of the war were visible. Jaden approached quietly, his face drawn, eyes weary. "We did it, Zuri, but at what cost?" His voice trembled slightly, as if the weight of the victory had yet to sink in. Zuri turned to face him, her expression tired but resolute. "The cost of survival. We knew this wasn't going to be easy. But it's not over yet. The Jarat Collective may be shattered, but their influence won't vanish overnight." He nodded, his eyes dark with understanding. "You know what this means, don't you? This war, it changes everything. The ex-Ruth, humanity, we're forever linked now. There's no going back." Zuri sighed deeply, standing to face the holographic map that still hovered in the center of the room. The galaxy was a vast and intricate web, and the ripples of the conflict would reach every corner. Alliances had been forged in fire, and trust had been earned through sacrifice. But the cost was clear. There was no denying that the war had redefined their future. "I know," she said quietly, "but we can't look back now. We've survived the storm, but the winds are still shifting." Her thoughts drifted to the survivors, the faces of those who had fallen, the families who would never see their loved ones again. The Hexruth species had been decimated, their numbers far smaller than humanity's, and their culture deeply intertwined with the planet they had once called home. But through their survival, they had forged a bond with humanity that had never been possible before. The pact wasn't just a bond of military strength, it was a pact of spirit, a recognition that survival meant more than just living. It meant living with purpose together. Jaden glanced at her, his voice softening. "You know, after everything that's happened, I think we're both realizing something. This wasn't just about defeating the Jarat, was it?" Zuri met his eyes, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself a small smile. "No. It was about building something that could survive beyond the fight. We've proved that our unity, our differences are our greatest strength, and now we have a future to rebuild." A transmission pinged on the console, pulling Zuri back into the present. The ex-Ruth's leader, Thrall, appeared on screen, its glow soft but unwavering. Dr. Okafor, Thrall said, its voice carrying a depth of wisdom earned through countless cycles. The war is over, but our work has only just begun. You have proven yourself as both a scientist and a leader. The breath pact you created has united us, and we must now work together to heal what has been broken. Zuri nodded, her heart swelling with a bittersweet pride. We will rebuild Thrall, together. But we must also honor the fallen. There are no easy answers, but there's strength in facing what's ahead. Thrall's eyes dimmed slightly. The path ahead will be long, but we are not afraid. The cost of survival is high, but we are still here. Together we will endure. The transmission ended, leaving Zuri with a sense of quiet resolve. There was still much to be done. The Jarrat had been defeated, but the scars of the battle would linger, not just on the bodies of the fallen, but on the fabric of their societies. Trust, once broken, would take time to heal. Jaden stood beside her, a silent support. We've taken the first step, Zuri. Now we walk the path together. The future's not just for us, it's for everyone we've lost too. Zuri's gaze turned back to the map, her mind whirling with possibilities. The war had cost them more than they had ever expected, but they had survived. And together, humanity and the Ex-Ruth would forge a future, not of conquest or dominance, but of cooperation and understanding. We'll build a future, she whispered to herself, one where we breathe together. The stars outside the window seemed to shimmer with a quiet promise. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk, a journey made stronger by the unity that had been born in the fires of conflict. And as Zuri looked toward that uncertain future, she knew one thing for sure. They had faced the storm. Now, they would build something that could stand against anything the universe threw at them. The dust of war settled slowly, leaving behind a silent but palpable tension. The space around Odara seemed vast, yet in the wake of the Jarrat's defeat, it was also strangely empty. Zuri stood at the edge of the observation deck, watching as the remnants of battle, shattered ships and debris, drifted silently in the void. It had been a victory, but at a heavy price. Humanity and the Ex-Ruth had lost too much to celebrate in the traditional sense, and yet there was a quiet hope beginning to stir. "Looks like we survived after all," Jaden said, his voice steady as he joined her at the railing. He was looking out at the same scene, but his expression was more contemplative than hopeful. "I've never seen Odara so quiet." Not even after the first colonization. Zuri nodded, her gaze fixed on the debris floating in space. "It's not just the planet that's quiet, it's everything we've built. The fear's gone, but the cost remains. We've lost too much to just move on." She paused, rubbing her temples as if trying to ease the ache in her mind. "But I won't let it break us, Jaden. Not now. Not after everything." He stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You've led us through the worst, Zuri. You brought us together when it seemed impossible. This peace, this unity, it's because of you." She glanced at him, but the pride she usually felt at his words didn't quite reach her heart. There was too much left to rebuild, too much raw emotion still lingering beneath the surface. Maybe. But we're only here because the Ex-Ruth believed in us too. This peace isn't mine, it's ours. The wind outside, invisible in the vacuum of space, seemed to carry a soft hum like the faintest of whispers. The alliance had been forged in fire, but Zuri knew that it wouldn't be enough if they couldn't move forward together, side by side, learning to understand each other. The Breath Pact was more than just an agreement between species. It was a promise to find harmony where there had only been division. Turning back to the command center, Zuri saw that the team was already hard at work, reviewing the aftermath, ensuring the resources were properly allocated for the rebuilding efforts. Yet, despite the tasks at hand, there was something in the air, a sense of potential of change. She could feel it deep within her bones. The war had shaped them all, but the peace that followed could be just as transformative. Minutes later, she was standing before the newly formed Joint Council, a body that represented both human and Ex-Ruth interests. The room was filled with representatives from both sides, some with weary eyes, others with hopeful gazes. It was a symbol of what had been achieved, an official acknowledgement of the partnership that had held together the alliance through the darkest of times. Zuri took a deep breath before speaking, her voice steady but firm. "We've just won a battle, but our real fight begins now. The Zarat Collective may be gone, but the wounds they've left behind won't heal on their own. We've been given a second chance, a chance to build something better, something more than survival. It's not just about defending our worlds anymore. It's about learning to live in a way that honors both our past and our future." There was a quiet murmur around the room, the weight of her words settling over the council like a soft blanket. Adison Daur, the representative of the human colonies, nodded thoughtfully. "You're right, Dr. Okafor, but this peace, this new alliance, it's not something we can take for granted. We need to make sure that this unity is built on more than just the ashes of the war. We need to invest in it, nurture it, and hold it up like the treasure it is." Zuri met her eyes, appreciating the depth of understanding that lay in her words. "Exactly. And it starts with us. We've already proven that we can stand together, but now we must show the galaxy that this isn't just a fleeting moment. The Zarat came to destroy us. We've learned that we are stronger together than apart. Let's make sure we never forget that." Thrall, the ex-Ruth leader, stood beside her, its form radiating the quiet strength of its people. The Breath Pact was not a simple alliance of convenience. It was born of trust. But trust, like any living thing, must be nurtured. It paused, its voice resonating in the stillness of the room. "We have fought for survival. Now, let us fight for peace. The Zarat are gone, but the universe will test us again, and when it does, we will face it as one." Zuri nodded, her heart swelling with the shared understanding that echoed in Thrall's words. This was more than just survival. This was the beginning of something greater, something that transcended individual species and cultures. The rest of the meeting was filled with planning, strategizing, and setting the course for a future that no one could predict, but one that they would face together. As the council adjourned, Zuri felt the weight of what was ahead, but it no longer felt overwhelming. It felt possible. Together they would rebuild. Together they would create something new, a foundation of unity that could withstand whatever the galaxy might throw at them. When the room had emptied, Jaden stood by her side again, a knowing look in his eyes. "You've given them a future, Zuri. You've given us all a future." Zuri looked out over the expanse of space, the stars twinkling softly in the distance. The journey ahead was uncertain, but as long as they moved forward together, she knew they would endure. "We've given them hope," she whispered, "and that's the greatest gift we can offer." The years that followed the war were nothing short of revolutionary. What had once seemed like the distant dream of an isolated few had become the vibrant reality of a united galaxy. Humanity and the ex-Ruth, once divided by centuries of mistrust and fear, now stood together as partners, their bond strengthened by the trials they had faced. The Breath Pact was more than just a treaty. It was the living testament to their shared survival and growth, a pact forged in fire, tempered in blood, and now glowing with the light of hope. Zuri stood on the balcony of the newly rebuilt command tower on Odara, watching as the sun dipped beneath the horizon. The city below was alive with the hum of progress. Ships of all sizes were departing from the spaceports, some heading for new research missions, others joining the growing exploration fleets. It had been a long journey to this moment, and the weight of it all pressed against her chest. But in her heart, there was a quiet joy, a joy born of knowing that the legacy they had created, this shared future, would transcend their own lives. Her comm device beeped, pulling her from her thoughts. She tapped it quickly, and Jaden's face appeared on the screen. "You look miles away," he said, a teasing grin tugging at the corners of his lips. "Did you forget about the meeting?" Zuri smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I haven't forgotten. Just taking a moment to appreciate how far we've come." Jaden nodded. "We've earned this moment, but the future's calling. There's a lot to be done." Zuri turned to face the horizon again. "I know. We're not done yet, are we?" "No, Jaden agreed, his voice softening. "But we're headed in the right direction." The human and Xruth fleets were preparing to embark on their first joint mission of exploration, a venture that would take them into the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Together, they would search for new worlds, new allies, and new challenges. The peace that had been hard won would be tested again, not by war, but by the unknowns of space itself. Zuri had spent years studying the stars, but now she was preparing for something far more profound than any research expedition. This journey would redefine the future of both humanity and the Xruth. The exploration of the unknown was no longer an isolated endeavor. It was a shared mission, one that would change the course of their civilizations forever. "We're about to make history," Zuri said, her voice tinged with the weight of her words. Jaden's smile softened. "So we already have." Later that day, Zuri stood before a new assembly of leaders, this time not just from Odara but from other human colonies and Xruth-held worlds. It was a council for the future, a body that would govern their joint exploration efforts, their shared scientific endeavors, and their cultural exchanges. The Breath Pact had evolved into a larger vision, one of collaboration, growth, and shared responsibility. They had not only survived together, they were now thriving together. Zuri stepped to the center of the room, her eyes scanning the faces of the men and women who had come to trust her, to trust in the unity that had been forged through struggle. The weight of their expectation was not lost on her, but neither was the fire that had been lit in their hearts. She could see it in their eyes, a fire that matched her own. "Today," Zuri began, "we embark on the next phase of our journey. The Jarat were a test, a brutal one, but we've passed it. Now we face the challenge of creating something new. We will explore the furthest reaches of this galaxy, not as separate nations, but as a united force. What we discover will not just belong to one species or the other. It will belong to all of us." A hum of agreement passed through the room. The bond between humanity and the Xruth had deepened, not just through their victories, but through the commitment to each other's futures. For the first time, they were allies in the truest sense of the word, not because they had no other choice, but because they had chosen to be. "We will go to the stars, not just to expand our territories, but to learn, to share, to build something that will endure long after we're gone. This," Zuri continued, her voice firm with conviction, "is our legacy." The room erupted in applause, but Zuri's mind was already on the future. The stars would be their next challenge, but there would be new struggles too. There would be political battles to fight, societal challenges to overcome, and inevitably moments where they would need to rely on each other once again. But as she stood before the assembly, Zuri felt something she had not felt in years: hope. The kind of hope that came from knowing they were not alone in this universe. They were not just humanity or just the Xruth. Together, they were something greater, a force that could stand against anything the universe had to throw at them. And with that, the doors to a new era opened. The promise of unity, the legacy of the Breath Pact, and the shared vision of humanity and the Xruth would guide them on a journey that would define the next chapter of their existence. It was not the end of their struggle, but it was the beginning of their future. The first wave of ships left the Odara system with a sense of anticipation that filled the air. It was the beginning of something bigger than any of them could have imagined. The alliance between humanity and the Xruth had opened the door to a future of exploration, discovery, and shared purpose. As the ships ascended, a sense of unity stretched across the stars, not just in the ships departing, but in every heart that watched them go. Zuri stood once more in the command tower. The vastness of space spread out before her like an open canvas. Behind her, the bustling hum of the command center was a constant reminder of the work that still lay ahead. Yet, for the first time in years, she allowed herself a moment to breathe, to take in the magnitude of what they had accomplished and what they were about to create. "So do you think they're ready?" Jaden asked from behind her, his voice soft but filled with the weight of the question. "Ready to face what's out there?" Zuri didn't turn immediately. Her eyes stayed fixed on the ships, each one a symbol of the trust that had been placed in them. "They're not just ready, Jaden. They're more than ready, and so are we." Jaden chuckled softly, walking up to her side. You've been saying that since the beginning, but this time feels different. It is different, Zuri replied, finally turning to face him. This is what we've been fighting for. Not just survival, but the chance to build something bigger than ourselves. We've fought our battles. Now we get to explore the stars. The room behind them was filled with the quiet bustle of preparations. The joint fleet, now comprising both human and ex-Ruth ships, was readying for the first official mission. It was a partnership forged in the heat of war, but now it was tempered in hope and ambition. Outside, the stars sparkled with the promise of a future that had never seemed possible before. Zuri had spent her life looking up at them, searching for answers in the endless expanse. But now, as part of a united front with the ex-Ruth, she felt more connected to those distant stars than ever before. It was no longer just about what lay out there. It was about how they would navigate it together. The mission was one of first contact. They would seek out new civilizations, new forms of life, and explore planets that no human or ex-Ruth had ever seen. It was a daunting challenge, but one that Zuri felt a deep sense of responsibility toward. The future they were building wasn't just for them. It was for everyone who had fought and sacrificed to get them this far. Jaden broke into her thoughts again. You've come a long way from the scientist trying to prove herself. Now you're a symbol. People look at you, and they see hope. They see what happens when we refuse to be divided. Zuri looked at him, a soft smile tugging at her lips. I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted to show that there's strength in unity, that the future we build together will be more than just a chance at survival. It'll be a chance to thrive. He nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. And you've done that. You've made us believe again, Zuri. As she stood at the observation window, the first of the joint fleet ships disappeared into the vast black, their engines leaving trails of light in their wake. It was a stunning sight, but Zuri didn't just see the ships. She saw the faces of the people on board, humans, Xruthians, all bound together by a singular purpose. The future was no longer an uncertain blur on the horizon. It was a future they were creating with every step they took, with every planet they reached, and with every new discovery they made. The stars above were no longer a symbol of humanity's isolation in the universe. They were a symbol of what could be accomplished when two worlds set aside their differences and dared to dream together. Turning away from the window, Zuri felt a surge of determination. There was so much more to do, so much more to learn, but for the first time, she knew they would face whatever came next together, as one. We have a lot of work ahead of us, Zuri said, her voice full of quiet certainty. Jaden smiled, clapping a hand on her shoulder. And we're ready for it. Together. The two stood in silence for a moment, watching as the ship sped farther into the cosmos, carrying with them not just the hopes of their species, but the promise of a united future. A future where exploration, cooperation, and understanding were the foundation upon which they would build their new home among the stars. Zuri watched them disappear, knowing that the journey they had started wasn't just about the stars. It was about the bond they had created, the legacy of the Breath Pact, and the future they would face as one. And as the light of the ships faded into the dark, Zuri allowed herself to believe for the first time that the universe was full of infinite possibilities, and they were ready to explore every single one of them. Years had passed since the first joint exploration mission. The ships that once carried humanity and the Xruth beyond their worlds now returned as emissaries of a new era, a time when no boundary, no star, and no civilization were unreachable. The alliance forged in war had long since blossomed into a vibrant, interconnected network of colonies, planets, and races, all working toward a shared dream. Zuri stood at the top of the central command tower, gazing out over the sprawling city of New Lagos, a city that had grown exponentially, its skyline filled with skyscrapers made from a fusion of human and Xruthian architecture. The mix of organic, flowing shapes with sharp, technological edges was a living reflection of the culture they had built together. Below her, the streets bustled with activity. Not just humans, but beings from across the galaxy living side by side, Traders, diplomats, scientists, and students mingled, exchanging ideas, knowledge, and cultures. A few years ago, this sight would have been impossible. The tension, the fears, the divisions, they seemed like distant memories now, as though they had always been destined to overcome them. Jaden walked up beside her, his expression quiet, thoughtful. "Hard to believe it all started with one decision," he said, looking down at the vibrant city below. "One moment where everything could have gone wrong. Yet here we are." Zuri nodded, her eyes following the ships that took off from the city's spaceports. "I think about that day a lot. The first time we reached out to the ex-Ruth, when I gave them the oxygen. I didn't know then how much it would change everything." Jaden glanced at her, his expression warm, filled with a mixture of admiration and understanding. "You didn't just give them oxygen. You gave them something far more important. You gave them a reason to believe in us, to believe in unity. And it's because of that, because of your choices, that we stand here now." Zuri exhaled slowly, taking in the scene. "We've built something, haven't we? Something that can't be undone. No war, no division can break what we've created now." Her voice was firm, yet there was a softness in her tone, a quiet pride. This was the future she had fought for. A future where all species, not just humans or ex-Ruth, could coexist, explore, and grow. They had already begun to map out new worlds, opening trade routes, and inviting other civilizations to join their shared dream. They had established the groundwork for peace, not through the force of arms, but through understanding, trust, and collaboration. "Yeah, we have," Jaden agreed. He paused, watching the ships soar into the sky. "I never thought I'd see the day when humanity would look outward, not with fear, but with hope." Zuri smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "I don't think it's just hope. We've built the foundation for something greater. This isn't just about exploration. It's about connection, about understanding that the galaxy is big, and we're not the only ones here. There are so many possibilities out there, so many new experiences we can share with others." Jaden nodded. "And we're not just surviving anymore. We're thriving. We're shaping the future. Together." They stood there in silence for a moment, watching the horizon as the suns of Odara set in the distance, painting the sky with hues of purple and gold. The air was calm, the city around them alive with the pulse of a new era. The hum of progress and possibility was in the very air they breathed. Zuri turned to Jaden, her eyes bright with the excitement of the unknown. "It's just the beginning. There's so much more to discover, to learn, and to share. We've only touched the surface of what we can do. The Breath Pact wasn't just an alliance. It's the first step towards something that can change the entire galaxy." Jaden smiled, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "And it's a legacy that will last forever, not just for us, but for every generation that comes after us." Zuri glanced back at the city, then at the stars above. The journey ahead was long, but she no longer feared the unknown. Instead, she felt a profound sense of purpose. Together, humanity and the ex-Ruth would lead the way into that future, creating a galaxy where division and distrust were replaced with cooperation and shared goals. "We are bound by the stars," she said softly. "And nothing will ever break that bond." Jaden's gaze softened, a deep respect in his eyes. Nothing. As the last of the ships ascended into the sky, carrying the hopes of billions, Zuri allowed herself a single, fleeting moment of peace. The road ahead would be full of challenges, of course, but it was a road she would walk without hesitation. They had faced the darkness together, and now together they would build a future without boundaries.